Hello, welcome to Love Lust Betrayal. Subscribe if you like our stories. Let's dive into the story. I never thought my life would turn out this way. I'm John, and I've always considered myself to be a straightforward man based on the principles I was taught. Growing up, I learned that loyalty, honesty, and integrity were the foundations of any relationship from my small, hardworking family. Throughout my career, friendships, and above all my marriage, I upheld these principles. If I had one belief, it was that trust should be the foundation of love. I treated my wife, Mia, in that manner from when we first met. Mia was the kind of woman who brightened a room simply by entering it. She was kind, gorgeous, and extremely driven. She appeared to be everything I could have hoped for in a companion. Our 3 years of marriage had been the happiest years of my life. We had a strong bond, and learning of her pregnancy had only strengthened it. I believed we had it all. A strong relationship, a future together, and now a child on the way. I was determined to give Mia and our child the life they deserved because the excitement of becoming a father gave me a purpose I had never experienced before. However, life can throw you curveballs that are so strong they destroy everything you believe in. I had no idea that my entire world was about to collapse and reveal a reality that I could barely handle. I began to notice minor, subtle changes in Mia's behavior as the weeks went by. At first, they were hardly noticeable, just minor details that gave me the impression that something wasn't quite right. Mia, who was usually very honest with me, started acting aloof and preoccupied. She would occasionally look off into space as though her thoughts were 1,000 miles away, only bringing herself back to the present when I inquired about her well-being. She would say that everything was good and smile, but there was something different about the way she looked at me that I couldn't quite explain. Then came the late evenings. Mia had a powerful corporate job and had always been driven, ambitious, and prepared to work extra hours to achieve her objectives. I appreciated that about her. It was one of my favorite things about her. But all of a sudden, those late nights started happening more often. She would arrive home exhausted, sometimes long after midnight, and fall into bed without saying a word. She would dismiss it when I asked, claiming that her impending promotion simply made work more difficult. I did my best to support her and be understanding, but something wasn't quite right. Her late nights seemed to involve more than just work, and I couldn't get rid of that feeling. Then there was her phone, which she began to carry with her everywhere, practically as a lifeline. If it buzzed while we were together, she would check it quickly, almost nervously, and then put it face down. She would never leave it lying around anymore. She gave me a brief, tight-lipped smile when I casually asked her why she had been so protective of it lately, claiming it was just work-related. But it felt phony, as if she were concealing something from me. I made an effort to ignore the uncertainties that were starting to creep into my thoughts. Every night when I lay next to Mia in bed, I couldn't help but feel uneasy, even though I told myself that I was just being paranoid that she was stressed out due to her career and pregnancy. Glaring at me, no matter how hard I tried to hold on to the day, it all fell apart. The woman I thought I knew so well was slipping away from me, whispering that something was wrong. Started off just like any other. Mia had rushed out the door, barely giving me a farewell kiss before leaving early for work. A familiar twinge of doubt settled in my chest as I watched her leave. I made an effort to ignore it, telling myself that I had to concentrate on my own life and career, but the nagging feeling persisted. I had the impression that I was living with an unfamiliar woman whose secrets were separating us. Mark, a close friend, texted me later that afternoon to ask if we could grab coffee. Having known me through every stage of my life, he was one of my closest friends. I was intrigued by his tone because it sounded urgent, almost uneasy. He appeared more serious than normal when I first met him, looking around the packed cafe as though he was attempting to determine the most appropriate way to express what he had. He said in a low voice, "John, I have something I need to tell you. I'm not sure how you'll react, but you deserve to know." My heart began to race. I was unsure of the cause, but all of my suppressed doubts and suspicions suddenly surfaced. Before he spoke, Mark looked around, inhaled deeply and leaned closer. It has to do with Mia. She wasn't by herself when I saw her the other night. As though searching for the right words, he paused. Her relationship with someone, specifically her boss, didn't seem professional. They were at a tiny restaurant that was hidden in a corner and had poor lighting. It was more than just a work dinner based on the way they were interacting with one another. I felt as though the air had been forced out of my lungs as I sat there motionless. As I tried to comprehend what he was saying, my mind was racing with pictures of Mia's aloof demeanor, her guarded phone, and her late nights. They all fit together like parts of a horrible puzzle that I had previously been oblivious to. I was so desperate that night that I didn't take Mia's phone until she was asleep. My hands trembled as I looked through her messages and pictures, hoping and praying that Mark had been mistaken. But then I saw it. A series of messages between her and her boss that were full of unambiguous, cutting-edge words. It was all there, me like a knife. Every late night at work conceals the betrayal, the stolen moments, and the whispered promises. As I read each line, my heart broke, drawing me further into a pit of hurt, betrayal, and rage. Any remaining hope I had for us was smothered by the reality of her betrayal, which made my stomach turn and made it difficult for me to breathe. I have little recollection of the hours that followed. I sat silently as I stared at her phone, mentally reliving the messages, the raw pain in my chest growing with each word. How could she have betrayed me with her boss when she was the woman I loved and the mother of my unborn child? The betrayal was like a knife that kept twisting, causing a wound that kept bleeding. When Mia arrived at the door the following evening, her face was beaming, and I was unable to contain it any longer, with a warm, worn-out smile that used to make me feel secure and complete. But now all I could see was a mask, something concealed. The falsehoods below. I confronted her after waiting until she had finished putting her belongings away. I held up her phone, the evidence I had discovered, and my voice was colder and more steady than I had ever heard it. Her eyes grew wide, and her face changed from one of bewilderment to one of shock to one of shame, but I silenced her. A torrent of accusations, hurt, and rage that had been building for days erupted out of me. Mia, how could you have done this? What kind of betrayal could you have? For heaven's sake, we're getting married. My voice broke as I yelled. Was it worthwhile? Was this your idea of loyalty for all the nights you claimed to be working late? Mia stumbled as she searched for words, justifications, or any other way to clarify herself. Her eyes started to well up with tears as she attempted to touch my arm, but I resisted because I found the idea repulsive. Her voice was broken and shaky as she attempted to explain. Please, John. I made a mistake and didn't intend for this to occur. The pregnancy had just occurred, and I was bewildered and under stress at work. The rage was only heightened by her remarks. Your excuse is that it just happened. I was so angry that I was barely able to control myself. You had an option. My voice was raw every time you chose him over me, over us. Mia, I was caught between the hatred that was starting to taint every memory we had together and the love I still felt. Every accusation was met with her entreaties, apologies, and vacuous assurances that she would put an end to it and make amends. Yes, but I was beyond words. I was beyond forgiveness. No apology could ever mend the wound of her betrayal, which was all I could see. I finally met her gaze and said, You destroyed us, Mia, in a firm, icy tone. You ruined everything we owned. So I turned to leave her in stunned silence while the consequences of her behavior weighed heavily on us both. That night, my mind was a jumble of emotions that I was barely able to control, and I drove aimlessly. Something fundamental inside of me had been shattered by the betrayal, and I knew I would never be able to put it back together. Now it felt like a lie I had been too blind to see, tainting every memory and every promise we had made. Yes, I was angry, but underneath that anger was a raw, festering wound of sadness that simultaneously made my chest feel hollow and heavy. I was thinking about the times when Mia and I first fell in love as I pulled into a quiet, empty lot. The late-night conversations, the plans we made for the future, the stolen looks, all of it seemed so far away now, like memories from someone else's life. All I could feel now was the sting of betrayal. She was my confidant, my best friend, and the person I had hoped to start a family with. That night, something inside of me exploded, tearing at my heart and leaving nothing but rage behind. She couldn't get away with this, in my opinion. My future as a father in a happy family, my love, and my trust had all been stolen by her. I had had enough of being the forgiving, kind husband. I wanted her to experience the same suffering and destruction that she had caused me, but retaliation had a way of eating you alive and changing you into someone you barely recognized. Knowing that there would be no turning back if I followed this path, I struggled with that decision. I began meticulously organizing every aspect, calculating every action. I knew that Mia loved her job more than anything else, even more than her position, her reputation, or our marriage. She clung to these things, so I would gradually take them away from her until she felt the following morning. I began calling people in her company to fill the void she had left me with and spreading rumors about her and her boss. I gradually sowed doubt, allowing her world to fall apart from the inside out, just as mine had. Over the next few days, I could see how she had changed, the worry written on her face, the way her self-assured smile waned. I was supposed to feel satisfied as I watched her fall apart, but instead I felt even more hollowed out by the retaliation that now consumed me. I watched Mia's world fall apart in the weeks that followed. The rumors I had disseminated did their job, putting a pall over her career, her connections, and her meticulously cultivated reputation. The man she had risked everything for, her boss, started to distance himself, probably out of concern for his own job. With every day that went by, I waited for the fulfillment and sense of justice that I had hoped revenge would provide, but it never materialized. Mia became alone, caught in the web of consequences that, ironically, she had created for herself. Rather, I felt more empty than I had ever thought I would. My heart wasn't repaired or my wounds healed by witnessing her suffering. I didn't realize the cost of my retaliation until the quiet moments following the storm. I had allowed the betrayal to rob me of parts of myself that I hadn't even realized I was losing, and I had become enmeshed in it, defined by my resentment and rage. I had hoped that, by hurting her, I would regain my pride and dignity, but instead I felt even more hollow and like a shadow of my former self. I finally let go one evening while sitting by myself in our empty house. I realized that I would need to find a way to forgive, not for her sake, but for my own, if I wanted to find peace and genuinely heal. After looking at the pictures on the walls, the memories all around me, and the reminders of our shared past. A wound that needed much more than retaliation to heal gradually had been poisoned by revenge, which was a quick fix. I started the rebuilding process. I concentrated on myself, on finding the aspects of myself that had been hidden beneath the burden of anger and betrayal. Although it wasn't simple or quick, I gradually discovered a route forward that was exclusively mine. Unaffected by the suffering Mia had caused, I ultimately failed to exact the retribution I believed I was due. As I took that first step forward, I felt liberated and was given the opportunity to move on and find peace in a life beyond the suffering she had caused. Like the video, and subscribe to our channel if you want to see more videos like this.